In times of trauma and adversity, we must create space for connection by sharing a story of hope. Welcome to Stories of Hope Worldwide, hosted by Kerry Atherton. This podcast shares inspiring stories of individuals who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger, offering hope and resilience to listeners all over the world. Join Kerry, the founder of Stories of Hope, every week to hear these remarkable journeys and find strength to overcome your adversity. Now, let's listen in to this week's conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Stories of Hope Worldwide. I'm Kerry Atherton, and today's guest is Zac Jones. Zac is a young man who, fueled by drugs and alcohol one night, got behind the wheel of his car. On that fateful night, he crashed, leaving 4 people critically injured. Zac's just recently been released from jail, and he's a man on a mission now to send a very loud, clear message to any person that gets behind the wheel under the influence. Welcome, Zac. How are you going?
Very good. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. So, Zac, can you tell us a bit about that night?
Okay, so unfortunately, it wasn't just that night. There was a bit of a lead up to that night. I was surrounded by a group of people, and we would binge drink and take drugs quite regularly. There were some months leading up to this night, but one night I finished work, and I got a text from a mate saying, "Oh, we're going to a comedy show. If you can give us a lift there, we've got an extra ticket for you." And so I did. I gave him a lift there, and we went and saw this comedy show. And when the show finished, we jumped in the car and headed back to mine. And on the way there, we were joking about how much we were going to drink and how messy we were going to get. And so we'd already agreed that we were going to push it pretty far. So when we got home, we started drinking straight away, and we were drinking recklessly. Like, we weren't showing any kind of restraint, I guess you would say. And so we were just being incredibly reckless. As the night progressed, we were just drinking more and more and more.
You had to drink, Zac?
We probably had about 10 to 12 beers each. And then we moved on to straight liquor, vodka, which, by the end of it, me and one of the passengers in my car were just sculling straight from the bottle. So obviously we were being really, really silly. And when that bottle of vodka ran out, he suggested that we go to the all-night bottle shop, and I had my keys in my pocket. And so without, really thinking at all, I was like, yeah, all right, cool, let's go. We jumped in the car, and me and him were about to pull out of the driveway when another 3 of our friends that were there jumped in the back, and they wanted to come with. So I started my car, and I actually, as I was reversing out of the driveway, I backed into a car that was parked across the road. Like, that wasn't enough of an indication that I shouldn't be behind the wheel.
Yeah.
And so then we drove, and we didn't make it very far. I mean, there was such a short window between us sculling that bottle of vodka and then getting in the car that it hadn't really even kicked in yet. As I pulled out onto the highway and started driving, I think all the alcohol really started kicking in at once. And everything was just spinning, and I couldn't regulate my speed or see where I was going properly. And I didn't have any real sense of direction. And so my friend was giving me directions on his phone. And of course, he was too drunk to be able to see his phone properly. So I looked down at his phone to see where we were going. And what I did, I ran a red light and veered off the road and through a brick wall, narrowly missing a tree and a power pole. And we collided with this wall and went through it and rolled about 4 or 5 times. And the car landed on its side and caught fire. And it was very ugly. Luckily, there was a guy driving past with a fire extinguisher who actually put the fire out. Otherwise, we probably would have all burned to death.
Wow, I saw the pictures of the car. It's amazing that you all survived.
Yeah, it's the 2 police officers who attended the scene and then subsequently charged me later on said that when they arrived on scene, they pretty much called over the radio like, yeah, this would be a fatality. They didn't think that there was any chance anyone would have survived. They kind of looked at me like I was a ghost when they met me. They go, "Look, man, we've seen crashes half as bad as that where everyone's died. So we don't know why you're all still here."
Yeah. And so were you all taken to hospital?
Yeah, we were all taken to separate hospitals. And so when I kind of came to, in the hospital. I didn't know where anyone was, what anyone's condition was. Yeah, it was horrible. And so I stayed for like another day after the crash in hospital. And I didn't know at the time, but my face was actually all full of glass. My face was really swollen. And so when they kind of just said, "Oh, look, it just looks like you've got scratches and, a bit of superficial damage on your face." And I found out that one of the girls that was in my car was at the same hospital. And so I went and saw her, and she was in a back brace. She actually had a fractured vertebrae. So she was very nearly paralyzed. And so, like, I just burst into tears the second I saw her. I felt extremely guilty. And so I left the hospital kind of then and there, and went and spoke to the police a few days later, and they charged me. And but one of my passengers, my front left passenger, he was trapped in the car for over an hour. They had to like cut him out of the car to get him out.
Oh.
So he was very badly injured. He's made a full recovery now though, which is a blessing.
You must have had the absolute weight of the world on your shoulders.
Look, I mean, there's a rapper. His name is 360, and in one of his songs, he says you'd think having a near-death experience would make a smart person take their life more serious. And unfortunately, look, after the crash, I didn't pull up. I was, very guilt-ridden, and I was dealing with a lot of shame and kind of self-loathing. And so I went further off the rails with drugs and alcohol. And I knew that I'd spoken to a lawyer, and my lawyer told me that, look, I was probably going to go to jail. And so I really did kind of give up on life and living, you know what I mean?
Yeah. How old were you then, Zac?
I was 21.
Right. And how long have you been in jail?
I was in jail for just over 2.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So a little more than 912 days.
Wow. And what did they think that you were going to get?
My lawyer told me to expect anywhere from 3 to 5. And so I got 4 years, 9 months on top. So how it works is so you get your initial sentence, right? So my initial sentence is 4 years, 9 months, of which I had to serve 2.5 with no eligibility for parole.
And so now you're out with ankle bracelets?
Yes, I am. I have one on each ankle.
Can you show us the ankle bracelet?
Yeah, I should try. Hang on. So I have one here. That is my alcohol bracelet.
Right.
And so that takes a sample of my sweat every half an hour and tests it for alcohol. And then on this ankle, I have a GPS monitor that monitors my location at all times. And so
Right.
obviously neither of those I can take off. They're permanently fixed.
So how long are they fixed on for?
Until the parole board decides that they want to take them off. It's not up to me. So it's all dependent on my behaviour. So there are several conditions relating to my parole, which I have quite a long parole period. But so as I progress through my parole, the conditions will taper off.
So what do you reckon you're looking at? Another year, another 2 years with them on?
Look, I think that probably another 10 months at least
Okay.
before they come off. They might come off sooner. Like I've been jumping through all of the hoops. I've been doing everything that's required of me by parole. So it's totally up to them.
Well, I really respect you speaking up and being a voice for this, for young people getting behind the wheel now. I've worked in schools for about 14 years on the Sunshine Coast. And, there's been quite a few kids from that school who have lost their life because of drugs and alcohol and driving. And the aftermath for a whole community is just absolutely devastating. It takes courage to be the person that's been the one behind the wheel and to get up and send a message like this. And I know your desire is to avert anyone from going through or putting other people through the same as what you guys have been through.
Absolutely. I mean, there is this really unhealthy culture, teens and young adults, that binge drinking is fun, and it's the reason why you go to parties. It's what you do, and it's really not. Pretty much every bad mistake that I've ever made, I can trace back to binge drinking. And now that I'm sober, I enjoy life and so many things more. But the problem is that when you're young, you really do think that you're bulletproof and that nothing bad's going to happen to you, and you don't. What I've noticed is a lot of teens, and I was one of them, don't understand how their actions affect other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I had to really learn the hard way that that what you do really can affect other people. And just because you don't have bad intentions and your intentions aren't to hurt people doesn't mean that you won't. And that's something that I try and get across to everybody that I can speak to, is that just because you don't want to hurt someone doesn't mean you won't. And actions really do have consequences. I mean, even outside of my crash, even outside of the people, outside of my crash, the families of the people who were in my car were gravely affected. Like, I mean, I remember seeing some of the family members of people who were in my car, and they were so broken after the crash, and they thought they could have lost, their child. My mum sat in absolute tears through my entire sentencing, and her entire world ended that day. And for 2.5 years, I was in jail. She was in jail too, and she suffered, and she didn't do anything wrong. She didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
And so it was a really hard way to learn the lesson that, other people are affected by your actions.
And, look, it's something that could happen to any one of us. Like I stopped drinking when I was 18 because I was an alcoholic and a pill addict. I didn't get my license, thank goodness, but I know that if I'd had my license, I could have been the one that drove people drunk and, caused a massive accident. And I hear it all the time in the 12-step rooms. People get up and say that they woke up the next morning after a binge and checked their car for blood. I mean, it's a pretty chilling thing to say, but that's the reality of what alcohol does. And what young people don't realise is that when we drink, our moral code's stored in the frontal part of our brain, and that goes to sleep. And so the decision-making process is just totally impaired. And young people just don't realise that. And another thing a lot of people don't realise is that alcohol is a depressant.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Yeah, and they have alcohol to drink their feelings away. What led you on the path that became so reckless? Can you take us back to when you maybe first used or first picked up a drink?
Well, I think when I was younger, I would see people drink, and I'd see people, drink and have fun and stuff like that. And so I think when I was younger, I associated drinking with having fun. As I got older, look, I had a pretty rough time in school. I moved around a lot, and I was expelled from a lot of schools for different reasons. But so throughout that time, I did deal with some bullying, and that kind of started me out just not being happy and not liking who I was, and things like that. And so I think I started just kind of stealing, a little bit of alcohol here and there from my parents.
And what age was that?
That probably started about when I was 13.
Okay, so you'd experienced a pretty intense amount of bullying up to that point.
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. And so I I wasn't a happy teenager. I was upset a lot. I didn't like who I was. And, look, there are a lot of times where I didn't really want to be. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be alive. So I
Wow.
think I instantly started looking for something that would take me away from those feelings.
Yeah.
I never gave myself the opportunity to really work through those feelings. And so once I started, drinking alcohol, and, when I was like 15, I started smoking weed, and I was able to disassociate temporarily from those feelings. They very quickly became a crutch, and they very quickly became what I turned to escape those feelings. And so then going back to that association that I made between drinking and fun, really the only time that I felt happy was when I was substance affected.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
And so it very quickly became a slippery slope. Once you begin to use, it's never enough. And so smoking a bit of weed, became doing harder drugs, and then, it just progressed more and more and more until, and there were plenty of times where I said to myself, oh, I'm not addicted. I could give up anytime I want. And before you know it, you can't. It begins you don't want to, and then it turns into you can't. And yeah, I was completely reliant on drugs and alcohol to get me through just each day, especially after my crash. I mean, I would have really bad night terrors as a result of the crash. And so I would use methamphetamine to not sleep, and to try and stay awake as long as possible.
You actually escaped from the sleeping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah.
And it would kind of really numb me. And so that's where I started using methamphetamine quite heavily, was after my crash. And yeah, I was drinking every day, and I was smoking every day, and it It did. It spiraled out to the point where I physically knew that I was addicted, and I didn't know how I was going to get off.
Yeah.
And I'd really just kind of given up hope at that point.
Did you ever go for counselling or put your hand up to seek some other way?
Not really. I kind of gaslighted myself a little bit in terms of after my crash, I told myself that I did this to myself and that I was the scumbag, that I didn't deserve help. And so I would downplay my emotions, or I would unvalidate my own struggle because it's like, okay, well, hang on, how's your passenger? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You know, I would unvalidate all those things that I was feeling because I would tell myself it was my fault and I deserved it. So I didn't seek counseling. I kind of just really beat myself up.
So you had this sense that you deserved to be punished.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I would tell myself that I was a bad person and that, I was all these horrible things. And so, I believed it. It wasn't until I went to jail and met some really bad people. A lot of the negative qualities that I possessed were kind of reflected back at me by other people, that I kind of realized that that wasn't who I was. And that the reason I felt the way I did was because I felt guilty and I felt ashamed of what I'd done.
yeah,
And so it wasn't until then that I really started to understand that what I'd done wasn't who I was, and I could be better and I could turn my life around.
yeah.
And that's where that all kind of started.
I love that. And that's something that I say to all my counselling clients and to myself, like our past doesn't define us, it merely shapes us.
Absolutely.
And it's great that you're using your pain now to find a greater purpose to help others.
For sure. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So what else did you learn in jail? Did you have any like light bulb moment in there? I mean, it's a pretty heavy place, isn't it? When you've come from living at home and you
Yeah.
put in with different criminals and
For sure. I mean, look, I could tell you for hours and hours things that I learned while I was in jail. I surprised a lot of people by saying that going to jail was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
yeah, I've heard that before.
Unfortunately, I've always been a very stubborn person. Kind of takes a lot for a message to sink in, and so I needed a lesson. I personally needed the lesson of jail to really kind of wake up to myself a little bit. But so I learned so much about myself and who I wanted to be and how I got to where I was, and so much about being just a man, and not in terms of being hard and being really macho. Like, I mean, I learned to have an ability to be vulnerable and
That's
not try and be something that I wasn't, you know,
not try and prove, not have to feel like you have to prove yourself.
not trying to prove myself. And I learned the ability to back that. So, I don't have to be macho to stand up for myself, but I'm passionate about what I believe in. And so I can stand up for that. I learned that part of the reason why I used drugs and I was so hooked on drugs was because I had used them for so long to deal with emotions.
Yeah.
That throughout my teenage years, when teenagers go through all these massive emotions and these big highs and lows, and I'd pretty much spent my entire teenage years on drugs, so I had left myself ill-equipped to deal with my emotions. And so I spent a long time working with the psychologist in jail, voluntarily, and enrolling in self-help programs and courses and stuff like that to try and learn how to deal with my emotions properly. And it's something that sounds so silly that me as a 21 to 24-year-old actually had to learn how to deal with his emotions. But I did, because I had not done that. I had not given myself the opportunity to learn how to resolve internal conflict.
Wow. Yeah. And something that is pertinent with addictions is that when people start using is the age that they stop growing emotionally.
I've actually, wow, it's so crazy you say that, because I genuinely have seen that in people, and I've seen that in myself. When I was 15 was when I really started smoking weed and getting into drugs. And I genuinely do not believe that I matured emotionally between that time and between going to jail and getting sober. I
Yeah.
genuinely believe I still had the emotional capacity of a 15-year-old. And I saw that every single day in other people as well while I was in jail.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I stopped drinking and taking pills at 18, I cried every day for about 2 years. So I started at 10. I was emotionally like a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to emotionally grow up. And lots of people that are trying to come off drugs and alcohol get really shocked at how emotional they feel.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you've never really dealt with your emotions ever. You've got to learn how to deal with emotions and sit and do life on life's terms.
Absolutely. I mean, look, for the first, like, let's say 18 months of my set, every single night I would lay, as soon as I was locked in my cell, I would just relive every bad choice that I'd ever made, every horrible thing I'd ever said and done, every time I made an idiot of myself because I was too fucked up on drugs or whatever. And it would make me so anxious and embarrassed, like I'd feel like pulling out my hair sometimes. And what I realized is these are all these things that have been floating around my head that I've never dealt with, I've never resolved.
Yeah.
There are emotions that I've never let myself feel. And so I did. I had to spend a lot of time feeling all that emotion and kind of catching up. My psychologist likened it to having a bin in the corner of your mind. And every time something happens, when you're on drugs, you're not actually like you're just kind of throwing whatever happened, whether it was an embarrassing moment or whatever happened, kind of just throwing it into the bin in the corner. When you're on drugs, you don't actually pick that bin up and empty it out. You just keep letting it fill up until it's overflowing and it's making a mess of your brain. And that's genuinely what was happening to me. All of these little traumas and all these little things that were eating away at me inside, I wasn't throwing that out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Zach, what would be a message that you would want to tell parents of teenagers today? I mean, I hear the stories all the time about the drug use at school and the amount of kids that are
Yeah.
taking drugs, and also that, weed is laced with ice these days. A lot of, people don't even realize that. I counsel young guys that have been, on just weed, and they're like, I can't understand why I'm so addicted and why my behaviour is different now. So we have a massive drug problem in Australia, and it's something that doesn't really get talked about enough, and a massive binge drinking problem as well amongst our teenagers.
Yeah.
So what would you say to parents out there to make them more aware of being vigilant with their kids, or to help them know what signs to look out for from, let's say, year 7 or 8 on?
Look, I think I personally, as my mum would say, I left a trail that Stevie Wonder could follow. So even if I wanted to hide it, like if you're a vigilant parent, you gotta find out eventually. You gotta notice the different behaviors in your child. I don't think that you can make excuses for your children. The best thing that you can do is understand why they're using, because you know most kids try it and they'll either like it or they won't like it. And the reason that they'll like it is because it's doing something for them that they're struggling with, like me. So, I'd start smoking weed and it would really help my anxiety. And because I hadn't really worked through how to deal with my anxiety. Unfortunately, the thing is, especially with weed, people say weed is a gateway drug, and that's a heavily contested point, but I genuinely believe it is.
Yeah.
It is so downplayed. It's like, oh, it's just a bit of weed. You just sit back and you just chill out and da 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 da. And so people tend to like rationalize weed usage, like, oh, it's just a bit of weed. And that's, and I was guilty of that too. And the problem is it's not like I think weed is really dangerous. A, because it is a gateway drug to other drugs, but because people say things like, oh, music's better when you're stoned, or, movies are better when you're stoned, or food's better when you're stoned. That very quickly progresses into what's the point of going to a concert if we don't have weed, or what's the point of going and seeing a movie if we're not stoned? And so it very quickly just becomes more about the weed than actually going and doing things. That's something that I see quite regularly. So I mean, I don't know how to help parents get their kids off drugs. I could not be told. I could not be told.
So be vigilant, though, is the message.
Be vigilant and don't make
Don't make excuses. I love that.
do not make excuses. My mum put her foot down. The first time she ever caught me smoking weed, she put her foot down. She was not having it. And so, look, my mum did kick me out of home when I was 16 because the rules are quite simple. If you want to live under my house, there is no drug taking, right? And so I moved out and went live somewhere else that I could go and smoke weed. But it was never tolerated by my mother. some people might not agree with that, but I genuinely think that that was the best thing that my mum ever did, was not making excuses. Whenever I'd fuck up and I'd just have absolutely nowhere to turn to, I'd obviously go back home where I know that I couldn't smoke weed. And so I know that I had to toe the line. And whilst I didn't want to when I was younger, I knew that there was never any bullshitting my mum. And so I think the fact that my mum absolutely would just never tolerate it and would never make excuses or anything like that, I think that was a really, really good thing that my mum did. When I'm talking to teens or just anybody about like who are using drugs and stuff, I try and avoid saying don't do it. My message is an anti-drug and anti-drink message. But me personally, if someone told me not to do something when I was younger, I'd go and do it.
Yeah. And you consider that you were the ultimate risk taker?
Yeah, and I would. And so
that's very in line with addiction behavior, is being a risk taker.
So when I'm talking to youth and trying to educate them, I don't say don't do this. I say this is what I did that and this is where I ended up.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to plant a little seed in their head by telling them how messy I got and how far off the rails I went, in the hope that they might have a little light bulb moment. You know, the relationship between them and their parents might be falling to pieces. They might have lost. They might have had to move out. You know, they might have lost their job. These are all things that I did as a result of drug usage. I lost jobs. I fucked everything up with my family. I lost friends. I lost girlfriends. You know, I've ruined opportunities. And so the hope is that by me telling that to the youth and people who are starting to dabble in drugs, if they see those little signs, they think, oh, this is what happened to Zac.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just hoping that those little seeds that I'm planting kind of get in their head, because all I know is that me personally, when someone told me not to do something, I would do it.
Yeah, rebel.
Yeah.
Zac, what are your strategies now for dealing with shame and triggers and flashbacks? Because something that I notice with a lot of the clients that I deal with addictions is the shame that follows. And I think that that's the hardest thing. I think that's the most heartbreaking thing for me as a counsellor, seeing somebody coming in, sitting right before me, the person that they are now, they're still living in the person that they were and the things that they've done. And people need to know that they deserve a second chance.
Absolutely.
And shame is a silent killer.
It is.
I think shame is the silent killer today. So what's your self-care strategies when you hear those negative tapes start coming in again to your voice? Because they will come back and revisit you.
Absolutely. They do every single day.
Yeah.
So these days, I just counterbalance negative emotions and negative thoughts come into my head at their own will. Just it's totally arbitrary. Like I could be at work and then I'll start getting feelings of worthlessness and things like that. It's so weird because I never have to, like, they come into my mind so arbitrarily.
Yeah.
So I have to counteract those by consciously making positive thoughts and consciously telling myself the opposite of whatever is coming into my head. But you know, when I first went to jail and kind of started trying to deal with the shame and emotion, for me, the first step was acknowledging how I was feeling. Like I was feeling ashamed. Why was I feeling ashamed? Okay, because I crashed my car drink driving, because I was a junkie, because I let everybody down. And so I inadvertently started writing my book. And all I was doing was I was just trying to get everything out on paper and get everything out in front of me. So acknowledging it and accepting it was the first stage. And then I began trying to make up for it. So, you know, and that's what I'm doing, you know, talking to yous and trying to get my book and my story out there is because I want to try and help other people. The understanding that I can't take back what I've done, but
Yeah.
the idea that I can use it to help other people really does help me. But it's interesting. So the book is finished now and it's very close to being printed.
So excited. Can't wait to read it.
Thank you very much, Gary. So, but as I was editing the book with my mum, it was so hard. My mum quite often had to tell me, no, that needs to be in the book, because who I was when I started writing the book and who I am now are almost two different people. I went through this massive change in a very, really a very short window of time, 2.5 years. So, you know, how I was feeling about who I was, you know, at the start of my sentence, you know, I still kind of hated myself, but I was still had some very negative thoughts and stuff like that. And so when I was editing the book, once I got out of jail, I was like, oh, I want to change that. Doesn't sound good. And mum would have to be like, no, Zac, like that's how you were feeling. And this helped show people where you were at. And it's very true. And so it was really hard for me to work through my book and edit it because I was reading about the person I used to hate.
Yeah.
Reading about the old person that I didn't like. And so it was really hard for me to.
And you're like, I don't want that person in the book.
Seriously. But this is the thing. And my mum's partner, Jeff, said something to me one night that like just blew my mind. He goes, you will never, ever, ever be able to move forward until you are able to accept that person that you used to be.
Yeah.
And so all of the shame that I was feeling as a result of my crash, that's the crash. And I will always feel guilty for what I did. But understanding and accepting the person that I was back then, like I was a junkie and I was a child, really, like I was 21, but like, let's be honest, I was a kid, you know what I mean? And until I accepted that 21-year-old for the mistakes that he made and everything and understood that it was behind me, I could never move on. And once I got my head around that, I was able to read my story and go, yeah, like that's not me. That was who I was.
That's so great.
And so that really helped me move forward. And when I say accepting, it's also forgiving.
Yeah, forgiving yourself.
Forgiving myself for being in that place and understanding that I was, I was really hurting.
You were a broken person through addictions.
Absolutely. I cannot put that better myself. And I was broken. And so understanding that version of me was broken. And that's what led that version of me to doing those things. And once I was able to forgive and accept that, I was able to move forward.
Oh, thanks for sharing all that. That's amazing insight.
Thank you.
And, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? But nobody could say it better than somebody that's been through it. And it's such a powerful message for every person, really, that has stuffed up. And we're all on a journey. We all stuff up. Something that I say is it doesn't matter what we do, no matter who we are, what title we have, what job we do, whether we're homeless, rich, whatever. But at the end of the day, when the lights go out and we're all alone, we're all exactly the same. We're emotions in skin. We're all human.
Look, I made a promise to myself the day that I got sentenced when I was in the cells underneath the county court. I made a promise to myself that I would leave jail in a better state than when I came in. And that has transferred since I've been out. All I want to do is go to bed a better person than when I woke up. And if everybody had that mindset, or if anybody battling, with their emotions and stuff like that, just focused on that one little goal of just trying to be better than when you woke up this morning, over time, you really will find things get better for you. Whether you're, working on your own emotional health or the circumstances you're in, whether you're battling addiction or you're in a toxic relationship or whatever, if you slowly bit by bit work towards changing those little things, things really do get better.
Yeah, 100%.
I've been in the darkest places and I was there in the most vulnerable, helpless state, and I managed to turn around. And that's not like a credit to, I don't have some power that anybody else doesn't have. Everybody has that power within them. It's I'm still trying to figure out how to explain it to people, but everybody has that power to make drastic changes in their life, and it's just little changes at a time.
That's great. And so as we wrap up, what's your message for the world, Zac?
What's my message for the world? Wow, man, love yourself. Treat yourself with the respect that you treat other people with. So it's really important to understand that when you love yourself and you respect yourself and you treat yourself the way you deserve to be treated, people around you will treat you better as well. If you treat yourself like you're worthless, it's easy for other people to treat you like that too. If you treat yourself like you are a diamond, because you are, people will treat you like that as well.
Love it. Thanks so much, Zac. It's been so great chatting to you.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say quickly, our book is available for pre-release sale on our website, whythefallen.com. We'll be releasing, we'll be getting that printed, in the coming weeks. So look, if you guys think that my story could help you or someone, then please, by all means, grab yourself a copy of the book. Reach out to us on Why the Fallen on our Facebook page, or even our email address. If you want to get in contact with us, if you think that I could talk to somebody and help them, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Thanks, Zac, and talk soon.
Thank you very much for having me, Kerry.
Thank you for listening to Stories of Hope with Kerry Atherton. If this conversation helped you, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend or leaving a rating and review on your podcast player. If you'd like to find out more about Kerry Atherton, head to storiesofhope.com.au, where you can purchase her books or find her next event. Check the show notes for links and information about our guest in this episode, and remember, you don't have to walk your path alone.